Ezra Levant here, coming to you from the center of London. I'm outside Westminster Magistrates Court, where Tommy Robinson today was acquitted on charges under the Terrorism Act. You might recall I spent 2 days at this same court last month when Tommy was on trial for breaching that law. It was actually a very strange stitch-up, as they say in the UK. Tommy Robinson was driving to a train that is part of the Channel Tunnel. I don't know if you know that, but for several decades now, there is an underground path to a tunnel from the UK to the continent of Europe. And you can take a train, and you can actually drive your car onto a train and go across to Europe and drive onwards. Tommy Robinson was on his way to his home in Spain, where he has to live for security reasons, and he was identified by a cop who was actually a counterterrorism cop. Tommy was driving to Spain, and he was actually driving in a friend's car, and he had bought his ticket to go on the Channel Tunnel that day. And these three facts I've just listed, going to Spain, driving a friend's car, and buying his ticket on that day, those were the reasons that this cop said he pulled Tommy over to interrogate him. And to interrogate him under the Terrorism Act. Hang on, going to Spain, driving a friend's car, and buying your ticket for the day of, those are not indicia that someone is a terrorist. That makes no sense. They had Tommy wait for minutes, and then for hours, and then they grilled him about things, but actually not about terrorism. They asked him about his politics. They asked him about things that you could find just by Googling Tommy Robinson. Again, that's fine if you're out for drinks with Tommy Robinson, but if you're the police and you arrest him with no search warrant and no reasonable suspicion, you've got to do better. Now, the thing is, the Terrorism Act contains some extremely powerful tools for law enforcement, and you can imagine in some extreme cases that civil liberties might be abridged. For example, and I keep saying this, the ticking time bomb scenario, where something is imminently about to happen, and you've got to find out where the bomb is located or what the conspiracy is. The Terrorism Act contains a provision where police can compel you to answer questions. You don't actually have the right to remain silent, and they can compel you to give over your electronic devices, including your password on your cell phone. Now, there are some protections in place for this. Anything you say under this duress can't be used against you. So if you confess to terrible things while you're in this situation, you can't be prosecuted for it. The purpose is just to help in a counterterrorism investigation. But again, none of this applies to Tommy. He was driving home to Spain in a friend's car, and there was nothing fishy about what he was doing. But he refused to give police the password to his cell phone, and thus the trial. And just think about that. You're just driving across the channel, you're looking forward to a nice drive, and suddenly the police are demanding you for your password, and if you don't give it, you are charged under the Terrorism Act. That sounds so awful, doesn't it? It sounds like you were doing something atrocious when all you were doing is saying, no, you can't rifle through my phone. In Tommy's case, his main reason was that he had sensitive material on his phone, interviews with rape victims of the UK's grooming gangs, and he didn't want those to be shown to police or to others without the permission of the victim. Anyways, Tommy refused, and thus the 2-day trial here last month. I attended the trial, and I think what was the most salient to me was that the police didn't have a record of what they said or did. Their notes were vague and written weeks or even months after the event. In some cases, they said they lost their notes. They couldn't remember what questions they asked, and they didn't know what powers they had to ask it. It was actually the most embarrassing police testimony I've ever seen. One of the young officers was so nervous, he pounded back an entire carafe of water during his testimony. I tell you, as I said at the time, I'd love to play poker against a guy like that. He just cannot hide when he's fibbing. There were, I think, 3 police officers altogether, and what we learned from them is that they pulled over Tommy Robinson and because they realized they had a kind of celebrity on their hands, and instead of doing what other people do when they see Tommy, asking for a selfie, Well, these were cops who thought, well, we've got ourselves a fish here. Let's try and make something out of it. So one of the things they did in the trial is they said they called other police agencies around the UK. I presume counter-terrorism squad, 10x5. But no one cared that they had Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson is not wanted for any crime. No one has ever accused Tommy Robinson of terrorism. So you had these Keystone Cops, or I guess Hot Fuzz, as they would say in the UK. That's their movie that made fun of police. They had Tommy Robinson in their hands, but they didn't know what to do with them. And they questioned him under duress, but they actually didn't ask him anything about terrorism at all. They just asked him for his views on politics and journalism, which is interesting enough, but you don't have the right to stop someone to talk to them about their politics. It's not terrorism, and in fact, it's a protected characteristic under UK law. And that was the heart of the defense that Tommy's lawyer mounted in the trial last month. Instead of trying to fight on the phone password issue, Tommy's lawyers decided to fight on, was the arrest lawful at all to begin with? And by pointing out that there was no reasonable suspicion, no reason to detain Tommy, the questions had nothing to do with terrorism, they, instead of defending the refusal to give the cell phone, they challenged the legality of the arrest altogether. And today, the judge gave his ruling and relied heavily on that line of argument by Tommy's lawyers. Here's what I mean. To use that massive power, remember I told you that police can ask you any question, you don't have the right to remain silent, they can get into your devices, like that's shocking access that in the rest of the time you would never have that right to do that without a search warrant. I mean, the idea of police coming up to you and saying, give me your password is so alien to us, but it is only there for those crises, those emergencies of terrorism is afoot. For example, let's say, God forbid, if there was another 9/11 and you captured a mastermind before one of the jets, like which jet was it, which airport, you would want to be able to compel those answers if you could. But to use that sledgehammer, that civil liberties destroying sledgehammer, without there being a legitimate terrorism case, that is horrific. Not only does it abuse civil liberties, but it destroys trust in the anti-terrorism tool. If that anti-terrorism tool is appropriate, and the UK Parliament believes it is, it should be rarely used. And when it's used, it should be used on purpose and for good reason. Not because you've got a celebrity crossing into the Channel Tunnel and you want to keep them and sort of show them off for a bit. And the fact that they pulled him over without a reason, and the fact that their questions touched on his political views rather than anything terroristic, meant that the arrest and detention itself was unlawful, and anything that came from that was fruit from a poison tree. The judge specifically said that when the police referred to Tommy's past 10 years ago with a pro-British group called the EDL, the English Defence League, the fact that the police referenced that, which the EDL, by the way, it's not a terrorist group, it's not an extremist group, the police say as much. For these cops to say that Tommy's membership in the EDL 10 years ago was their reason for detaining him and questioning him, the judge said that proved that their primary reason for arresting, detaining, and questioning Tommy had nothing to do with terrorism, but everything to do with his protected political views. Very interesting to me that a political view is a protected characteristic here in the UK. Honestly, I don't know if it has the same strength in Canada, but it was very bracing to hear the judge say that. The judge, rehearsed the facts, recounted the facts of the case, and when he came to the testimony of the police, he was scorching. He said that the police were simply not credible. He did not believe what they had to say, and their answers were insufficient and vague. He actually tore a strip off them. It was quite something to see. Now, I don't think any of these cops will be fired for this whole schmozzle. And I think if it was a corporation, if it was a company, and 3 executives went rogue this way, violated someone's civil liberties, indulged their own politics, if a corporation did to a customer what these cops did to Tommy, heads would roll. There would probably be a cash settlement. But I'm pretty sure these police, if anything, will be given a raise and the pat on the head because they continue the government's vendetta against Tommy Robinson. But for the judge to just excoriate the police this way with racing, and I wonder if it'll be heeded if it'll be taken to heart by police across the UK, who many of whom seem to have a vendetta against Tommy Robinson, a vendetta led by no one less than the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer himself. Tommy Robinson is a politician, he's an activist, he's a journalist, he's an organizer, he's many things, but he is not a terrorist, and the court said that clearly today. Tommy's had an amazing month when you think about it. It started on September 13th with one of the largest rallies in UK history. The lowball estimate by police is 150,000 people, but some credible estimates put it over 1 million. Then he was a guest of the State of Israel, a state visit that just ended a few days ago where he met very senior government members. And then this victory today. Tommy Robinson is a political force to be reckoned with. But he should be reckoned with in political ways. Keir Starmer and the Metropolitan Police and all these other police forces should abandon their schemes of trying to get Tommy Robinson and just deal with him either by ignoring him or debating him or frankly adopting some of his ideas and, co-opting him. That's how you deal with a political rival. Ironically, Tommy today was saying he has to get ready for his next court case. I don't know if you remember, but Tommy and his family were hit by paparazzi on their vacation. The paparazzi flew to the resort, took pictures, and put the family in danger, actually. Tommy returned fire in the same way. He took pictures of the paparazzi. He had a paparazzi shoot pictures of the paparazzi, and they went to the government complaining, saying Tommy was criminally harassing them. The paparazzi who stalked Tommy on his family vacation complained to the police about Tommy photographing them. And so Tommy is being prosecuted, if you can believe it, for criminal harassment. It just doesn't end. This vendetta doesn't end. The countless millions of pounds spent by the British government chasing Tommy Robinson is absurd. Another absurdity, we were just talking about the Terrorism Act all day in court today. If you've been following the news in the UK over the last week, there have been a number of stabbings in the street on a train. There was a mass stabbing on a train. I think 10 people were injured. And in every case, police say, oh, no, it's not terrorism, it's mental illness. Yeah, that's the ticket, mental illness. Or they come up with some statement like that. So let me get this straight. Tommy Robinson won't give you his secret password to his phone. That's terrorism. But migrant men stabbing people on a train, that's not terrorism. The UK has to get its priorities straight. The amount of policing and prosecuting and harassing and haranguing that this government targets on Tommy Robinson compared to actual crimes, the priorities of this country are out of whack. But I think that's why they go after Tommy Robinson. They want him to stop talking about what he talks about. Tommy talks about mass immigration and he talks about rape gangs, which in the UK are primarily done by Pakistani Muslim men. It's just a fact, even if it's an unhappy fact. You could try and silence the guy who's talking about the problem, or you could fix the problem itself. So far, the UK has chosen to go after the guy talking about the problem. But at least for today, the guy talking about the problem won, and the government was chastised. And a special thanks to Elon Musk, who has supported Tommy Robinson in this trial and another, paying for his legal bill. In the past, as you know, Rebel News would crowdfund legal defense for Tommy. But Elon Musk has picked up the tab, an amazing, freedom of speech around the world. And yeah, that's my report from the streets of London outside Westminster Magistrates Court. Unfortunately, my travels to the UK to cover Tommy's court cases are not done. I mentioned the harassment case of the paparazzi. I'll come out to do that. And one of the reasons is because I love live tweeting in court, if you know what I mean. And I don't know if you saw that, but my tweets today got millions of views. I just like sitting in the court and typing as fast as I can, trying to capture the moment by moment, what's happening in the court, what people are saying. And it's a good alternative to having to wait to the end of the day to read the long essays in the regime media. But more importantly, I'm not taking the point of view that the regime media takes. Every single one of them, with maybe one exception, hate Tommy Robinson, attack Tommy Robinson, and distort the news. So I feel like I'm not just in there to report the news, but to offset the BS coming from the regime media. And in fact, it was a bit of a story. If you recall, a BBC journalist complained to the court that I was unlawfully tweeting. And the judge during the trial made me stand up and answer, what are my credentials? Am I a real journalist? And I had to furnish to him proof that I'm a credentialed journalist in Canada. Still, I wasn't allowed to sit with the cool kids in the court itself. I had to be in the public gallery, but I didn't mind that too much, other than it was a bit hard to hear. But although I have access to the public gallery and I'm allowed to open up my laptop and tweet, other citizen journalists are not, because they don't have the same credentials I have. And I think that's a major problem. I think the world has moved online. I really don't know anyone under 40 years old who gets a newspaper. Everything is digital now. Everything is Twitter-based, or X as it's now called, or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. The idea that citizen journalists who primarily use digital forums are kept out of the court while the legacy newspapers and TV and radio have a prestige position is untenable to me. And I think that it has within it an inherent bias. Tommy Robinson's populist conservative supporters are citizen journalists. The regime journalists, the haters, they get access. Tommy's people don't. It distorts the news of the courts. It gives people a false idea of what's being said and done. As I said to someone today, if your sole source of information about Tommy's trial was watching the BBC or reading the Daily Mail, you would be shocked that he won today. You wouldn't have seen that coming, because all you would have heard before was how nasty Tommy is, and they would have covered up the clear credibility gaps of the police witnesses. So I think that the justice system is doing itself no favors by shutting out grassroots citizen journalists, and not even being allowed to open up their laptops is quite incredible. So I'm lucky that I have that privilege based on my credentials in Canada, and I'll keep using that as long as I can. But I'll also advocate for others to have media credentials. Look, that's the way of the future. Transparency, and I don't believe that there should be a monopoly allowed for regime journalists just because they write for a fancy newspaper. And yeah, that's my report from the Westminster Magistrates Court. What a great day for freedom, a great day for the UK, and a great day for our friend Tommy Robinson.